the Cellar. Now, if I could do a drum roll, I would. Last week's drawing the winner was David Jepson. So, David, get a hold of me in PM or something, and give me an address, and I can ship your loot. And speaking of loot, I think the next thing I'm gonna give away is I have a very scarce T-shirt from Texas. Doug, the founder of the con, had Janelle Jaquez do a different logo every year that had a dragon, and it went on the front of the shirt. And after he'd been to some others, he started putting the ones he'd been to on the back. Well, I got a Night Valiant shirt that has, for Texas 11, that has all 10 badges on the back, and there are only a couple of hands full of us that can say that we, of the guests, that were there that many times. And so I realized I had 2 of them, and then I remembered how I got the second one. And so I decided that that's going to be in the next giveaway. I have a bunch of game shirts that I think I'll start giving away, and I'll sign them or whatever the hell. So anyway, that takes care of that. Now, we only got a handful of comments for this episode, and a number of them, most of them, talk about initiative. So I'm going to hop through the other ones, and then I'll read through the different initiative ones and then address it all at once. I don't really need to do it 4 times. So we'll start with the other comments and get right into it. I love that story about Mr. Orc. When my oldest was 8 years old, their mom and I took them to their first gaming convention where they made their very first D&D character, an elf ranger named Skullface. Not a single name. They explained that Skullface was a skull, child of Mr. and Mrs. Face. They also explained that Skullface was named such because his face looked like a skull. I still have that character sheet. It has drawn on the back a long stick figure mural of the adventures of Skullface in the Caves of Chaos. I really do love playing with younger players whose their imagination is unbridled. Now, depending upon the group, that can be a handful. But, yeah, man, I have a great granddaughter who can pull 3 dice out of my bag of story dice, roll them on the table, and tell you a story. She's 9 or 10 now. How old is she? I can never remember. So I have them on a list. She's 10. And she can make up a hook just like that. And I believe that type of unbridled imagination becomes a little stultified as we get older. We just don't have time to exercise it. Like any muscle, you need to keep exercising it. Or maybe it's just we lose the inclination. But yeah, those younger players, whew, man. And you know, my knock on the later editions is they seem to be written for these younger players. So anyway, all right, that's initiative. Okay, Bazillion fan here. Recently I've been listening to the podcast When We Were Wizards, and I find it really interesting. Have you had a chance to listen to it? Nope. If so, were you ever invited to be interviewed? Nope. If not, do you know why? Nope. And if you have listened, do you have any criticisms or points of disagreement you'd like to share? Nope. Sorry. Not heard of it. If somebody involved with it is listening to this, get in touch with me. I'm always available for questions and videos and whatever. And in fact, I just got asked yesterday about a new one that's going to be starting up here shortly, and said, sure, let me know when you got it together. Okay. You often mention that the rules you use are in a sweet spot between Zero Edition, the brown box, and First Edition AD&D. Can I share some details? Yeah. Back at that point in the development arc of D&D, we really believed in that these aren't written in stone warnings that we put into the fronts, either into the introductions or the forward or whatever. We really believed in that, and that's the way we played. And so it wasn't strictly this and it wasn't strictly that. Oh, I keep forgetting. I sink down in this chair. Excuse me for a minute. And you can't see my hands. So, back again. Take it from here, take it from there, mix it all together and do what you like. I don't play the rules as written. Never have. As I've mentioned before, my world clerics don't say prayer. They don't do spells. They say prayers. And in my world, clerics have all the prayers available to them appropriate to their level. And they don't have to decide in the morning when they get up what prayers they're going to say later today. So in my world, clerics are much handier to have around. Really want to keep the cleric alive. And I think they have a more robust and rich role. I run spells the way I want them to run. Nothing major. In my world, Magic Missile always hits for a couple of points. Always. Never misses. There's probably other things. But I pick and choose what I want. I remain consistent. Once I have done that, and so as we get to talking about initiative here next, you'll see more of how I slide around using the loosey-goosey atmosphere of the period in time that I've chosen to freeze in amber. Okay. So now I'm going to read all the initiative stories, questions, and then I'll go back and talk about them. All this talk about initiative, I still think group initiative is the most fun. Each round you roll. I would agree. The combat can change quickly and is more chaotic and resolves faster. It also adds some suspense to each round as initiative is rolled. Okay, and I would have to say that that's my favorite way to do it, and why. So, to my question, I was at a con this weekend in Minneapolis, Arnicon, and was in a session of chainmail reading run by Paul Stormberg. He was telling stories, and one that came up was that he said the reason movement and even missile range was not exactly realistic was that when Gary was deciding on some of these, he was using his sand table, and the movement was based on how fast or how far he felt a certain troop should cover on his table. So with the table being 6 feet, he felt cavalry should be able to move it across in 3 rounds. So they got movement of 24, while foot might get 12, as it'd take twice as long to cross. It's created some people feeling that some movement was unrealistic, but it was done to fit Gary's table where he would hold games and just stuck with the games. Do you hear anything about this, or are there any other rules which were really just designed to fit a certain situation, such as his sand table, and not for realism? He had a few other stories which were interesting as well, such as Gary using his knuckles to message sand table discreetly before committing to his turn because you couldn't measure before committing to an action, these sorts of things. Oh, yeah. I learned from Gary. Okay, you measure that spread of your hand, and then you just walk down the side of the table. I caught him doing it one time, and I thought, okay, good for the goose, good for the gander. And in that particular battle, I knocked out his catapult on my first shot. So, as to what, yeah, Gary had a 6-foot sand table, I believe, though I never played on it. I think it had been covered over by the time the company was formed and everything. It was probably being used as a table. That could very well be. Chainmail's not supposed to be realistic. Chainmail's a miniatures game. Miniature games are approximates, not exacts. There's, if you want an example of when miniatures are taken to an extreme to be correct, look at some of the English rules, especially, I'll think of their name in a minute. They publish several sets of rules, and they have 7 different kinds of heavy infantry. Well, not 7, I think it's 5. And War Games Research Group. And they're down into the nitty-gritty like that, which is okay if that's what you're trying to give. That's not what chainmail is. Chainmail is a superficial miniatures game. I wouldn't be surprised if that's, Gary never told me that story. But then again, I caught him with the finger thing. So maybe he decided he didn't need to share that with me. I can certainly see that if he was going to play on a 6-foot table, it makes absolute sense to break down the movement the way he did. Now, that's all cavalry. If you want to be more realistic, well, then heavy cavalry shouldn't move that fast, and light cavalry should move faster, so that number is really just medium cavalry. And no, that's not what chainmail is. Chainmail's getting together, putting some figures on the table, rolling some dice, and playing a very basic miniatures game. It wasn't meant to be something like War Games Research Group would do, where certain nationalities' chariots move faster than other nationalities' chariots because of improvements in the construction. Okay, I'm okay with playing rules like that, don't get me wrong, but that's not what chainmail is. Let's see. I saw someone talking about fixed initiative order systems. Rather than rolling at the start of every encounter, the player characters would each have an initiative rating and always act in initiative rating order, with the opponents getting inserted into the activation order based on their initiative rating. This way, you can know that the smart and agile thief was almost always going first, unless one of the opponents was even more smart and agile. What are your thoughts? I could see where this would make for an orderly way to do things, but I don't like it myself. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it if that's the way you play. I don't care for it. I like the swirling mayhem of melee. I like that. And as we go on later, I'll mention another thing that you can do. An initiative again. Player agency. Do you play that a PC may choose to go later than their defined initiative? Yes, I do. Or I'll also penalize them to go a little later, as I'll explain. It's something that would only apply in special circumstances because the earlier an initiative of PC is, the higher odds of defeating enemies is. But if there was some reason the player wished to have their turn later than their initiative, However that is derived, how does work both in play and mechanically, or more academically, I suppose I mean. Say you have an archer or a slinger, a missile weapon carrier. Now, if the archer is going around with the arrow on his bow and just resting there, not knocked and not drawn, well then I may give him no penalty. I'm more likely to give people that roll earlier actions a penalty. If for instance, the slinger is carrying his staff and has his sling in his pocket and his rocks in the other pocket, and something happens, I'm going to make them go late in the round. Now, they can roll with everybody else, and I'll just say, okay, add 5, add 4, whatever. If they roll badly initially, I don't add any more. But people that weren't prepared, weren't walked in on edge, are going to go toward the end or even at the beginning of the next one. My melee is not in the beginning squared off 1-on-1 or 2-on-1 or anything. It's a swirling mass. I roll for the bad guys. The bad guys score hits. I pay attention to what they score. They can't hit a certain, if they can hit a certain armor and below, then I randomly attribute that damage to one of the people with that kind of armor on. It sounds more complicated than it is, especially because I'm playing with the same player characters, the NPCs, over and over and over again. I can do that. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily an option in all circumstances. Now, toward the end, when there's 1 or 2 bad guys left, and the players are now circling around them, and they have them pinned, so to speak, in place, then you might see pairing off. These 2 on this one, and those 2 on that one, and those, you might see that then. Again, it's all circumstantial. What's going on? How's it going on? This thing's poking up in the air again. How is it flowing? And it's very fluid, and I like it that way. And I've not had any serious complaints about it. And what it means is that sometimes, if 3 of the party hit, and I roll which of the 3 ogres that they hit, they might have all hit the same one, in which case they might have taken it out. Or they might have each hit a different one, which has pissed off those 3. And it's so hard to issue a rule by fiat that says this is always the way it works. It doesn't. If I'm playing in a game when there's a magic user and he says, I'm going to cast a such and such a spell, and he rolls a 2, I say, fine, you can cast that spell on 0. Back him up 8. Because he's got to get all his stuff out and what have you. The archer that isn't knocked, the slinger that doesn't have a stone in the pouch, gets bumped back a little. I assume, unless they say otherwise, that those carrying hand weapons, melee weapons, have them drawn. Now, if they have more than one, I keep track of which one they have drawn. But they're more likely to have a weapon in hand as they go creeping through. Weapon in one hand and lantern in the other. Oh, there's a whole part of the screen I didn't see. I had it covered up. Oops. An easy to understand, whatever that definition is, an easy to understand initiative system, when all the players understand how it works, I believe makes combats and encounters go faster. At least in my games they do, because I'll start. All right, everybody's rolled. Okay, zeros, any zeros, ones, twos, and I'll go through the numbers. And if you dope off and don't listen, and I'm up to 5 already, and you were a 2, you might not get to do anything, or you may end up with the 9s. But once you get the group accustomed to this system, I think you'll find that it really speeds it up. I don't like a system where they just know because they have an ability or a skill. They just know. I don't like that. If somebody is on a potion that, amps them up or whatever, okay, they're always a 0. They're always ready. They're always first. And again, depending upon the degree of reality you want to insert, if you do have somebody that's all amped up on some kind of potion and that, well, there's side effects, bad as well as good. So you if you choose, you can go that direction. It's possible. I really don't have a lot more to say about initiative. I think we beat it up pretty good. Luckily, the majority of the very few comments that I got were about the same topic, so I could expand on it and in several different directions. I don't believe you can make initiative cut and dried. Not if you want to go with the flow, and I believe in going with the flow. I don't like playing adventures that only have one direction. I want options. I want to be able to cash in on those options when good things happen. That's just me. Now, those of you in the Queen City area should go online and look for something called Connington. Capital C, capital O, capital N, small INGTON.com. They're going to have a game convention in Covington, which is just across the river from Cincinnati, which means it's about 45 minutes or so from where I live to where they're going to be, because we're as far apart as we can get almost. But anyway, they're going to have a game con. And they're going to do a lot of cosplay and costumes and that's fine. Because that kind of stuff draws publicity from the media, and it laps over into the gameplay. So that's fine. So I'm going to meet with one of the organizers this weekend and with Jim and see what they've got up their sleeve, what they want to do. I don't want to run a bunch of games. It's too debilitating nowadays. And I am interested in doing some sort of panel discussion or seminar or, whatever on playing the old school way and why it's the best. And I said that if it was something that fit into their framework, I'd run a VIP game where they had to pay for the seats that proceeds to go to charity. So I'm going to meet with them this Sunday and see what's what. But I'm kind of excited. I'd like to see another con downtown in a greater urban area, as opposed to where, unfortunately, Cincy County is now, up in the next county in a very large exhibition hall. So we'll see. We'll see. But, you can't lose another con. Yay, another con. Let's do it. So I'll give you a full report when I know more about it. And until that time, I guess all I got to say is Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.